We like to think of serial killers as solitary monsters, men who operate in the shadows, disconnected from society, hunting in absolute isolation. When police raided the Chicago home of John Wayne Gacy in December 1978, they unearthed 29 bodies buried in the dirt crawl space beneath his floorboards. 4 more victims were recovered from nearby rivers. The prosecution built a straightforward case. Gacy was the killer clown, a singular predator who lured young men and boys to their deaths without outside help or awareness. But treating Gacy as an isolated anomaly requires ignoring the physical and logistical impossibilities of his crimes. This entire narrative is a historical lie. This timeline illustrates a glaring geographic contradiction. On September 15, 1977, Robert Gilroy disappeared in Chicago, eventually ending up as one of the victims in Gacy's crawlspace. Yet documented flight records prove Gacy was 600 miles away in Pennsylvania at the time Gilroy vanished. Immediately following his arrest, Gacy himself explicitly asked interrogators if his associates had also been taken into custody. Gacy ran a business called PDM Contractors. The house functioned as a headquarters for his company and a flophouse for his transient male employees. Among the payment checks and time cards signed by Gacy was a recurring name, Philip Paskey, a documented employee who lived with Gacy. Philip Paskey was a convicted violent criminal. He was also the active second-in-command of a nationwide child trafficking ring operating out of Chicago. Gacy did not operate in a vacuum. He actively employed and housed the upper management of an organized human trafficking syndicate. The architect of this syndicate was a man named John David Norman. While notorious serial killers dominated the television broadcasts, Norman quietly built an invisible empire of sexual exploitation. This map illustrates the reach of Norman's Delta Project. From Dallas to California to Chicago, he established a highly coordinated trafficking network. He structured it with a corporate hierarchy. Regional hubs, called Delta Dorms, were managed by dons, who trafficked underage boys called cadets. Norman managed this network even from behind bars, relying on his trusted lieutenants. His active field commander running the Chicago hub was Philip Paskey. The Delta Project functioned as a logistical supply chain. It provided a steady, organized stream of victims directly to violent predators across the country. To see how this supply chain functioned, we have to look at Houston, Texas. Between 1970 and 1973, an electrician named Dean Corll murdered at least 29 teenage boys and young men. Corll didn't hunt for his victims himself. He relied on 2 teenage accomplices to procure and lure boys to his various addresses in exchange for cash. Right around the time Corll's crimes were exposed, police raided John David Norman's Dallas apartment, shutting down a precursor to the Delta Project called the Odyssey Foundation. Investigators suspected Norman's operation was supplying victims directly to Corll. During the raid, Dallas police seized over 30,000 index cards, detailing a meticulous registry of the foundation's sponsors and clients. Norman's 30,000-card client network provided a systemic, protected pipeline of victims, the same infrastructure utilized by Gacy. Those index cards were explosive. The registry contained the names of prominent individuals, including local politicians and federal employees. Local police packaged the physical cards and sent them to the United States Department of State in Washington, ostensibly to investigate potential passport violations for clients traveling internationally. What happened next was a total destruction of evidence. The Department of State incinerated all 30,000 index cards. They made no copies, and they never forwarded the registry to the Department of Justice for investigation. While this federal erasure was happening in Washington, prosecutors in Illinois were pushing forward with the highly publicized narrow trial of John Wayne Gacy. The justice system intentionally severed the connections between local murders and national trafficking. By destroying the client list, they protected officials and allowed Gacy to serve as the ultimate fall guy. During Gacy's trial, prosecutors strategically ignored his employment of Philip Paskey. Presenting Gacy as a standalone monster guaranteed a cleaner, less politically dangerous conviction than exposing a nationwide trafficking ring. John David Norman ultimately served minimal prison time. He continuously rebuilt his trafficking networks under new names and corporate fronts until his death in 2011. Their use of direct mail, detailed client registries, and decentralized dorms laid the exact blueprint for modern trafficking networks on the dark web. The myth of the lone serial killer acts as a shield. Behind it lies a vast, invisible infrastructure of complicity that continues to operate in plain sight.